The Rosicrucian path is the journey of the mystic. Few souls brave it at any single time. Yet it is this internal voyage that has rewarded many of our greatest minds with the ability to enrich the world. But it is a pilgrimage each individual must travel in their own time, for it reveals the path of knowing. It transcends time and space. This path of the Rosicrucian reveals higher truths for personal evolution. You are invited to witness its sacred history. In legend, it is said that Hermes Trismegistus, to whom the Emerald Tablet is attributed, instituted alchemy so as to manifest on earth the power and wisdom of the deities. The goal of any true alchemist is to transmute that which is base into that which is pure, and this is often interpreted in terms of metals. Dr. Dennis William Hauck tells us that the legendary artifact known as the Philosopher's Stone has been widely regarded as the secret key to successfully transmuting any metal into gold. Beyond that, it was a universal solvent that could dissolve any substance that was immersed in it and extract its active essence.
The Philosopher's Stone is kind of this magical ingredient that could instantly transmute matter into higher materials, higher metals. And then there are the philosophers of nature who thought of the Philosopher's Stone more as a state of consciousness, if you will. And that included all kinds of great alchemists. And the Philosopher's Stone really is connected to consciousness, but it was a huge secret in alchemy. Recently, I've gotten a hold of Newton's private journals at the University of Cambridge, which they kept secret for a long time. His writing about the Philosopher's Stone had a lot to do with his states of consciousness and perception.
The stone was also a critical ingredient used to prepare the Grand Elixir and aurum portable, or drinkable gold, which could regenerate the human body. In addition, it was used to restore a plant or animal from its ashes in a process called Palingenesis, retrieval of the soul. Because the Philosopher's Stone carried the purified life force, it could also be used to create artificial living beings called homunculi. However, it is important to remember that the stone was not just a philosophical possibility or symbol to alchemists. Both Eastern and Western alchemists believed it was a tangible physical object they could create in their laboratories. The idea probably originated with the observation that some precious metals could be obtained from the ores of base metals. For instance, silver is often obtained from galena, the ore of lead. Also, the preparation of metal alloys and chemicals that imparted the characteristics of gold to other metals suggested there might be a single agent that would perfect any metal. The very concept of the Philosopher's Stone was also inspired by the transmutation of the elements, as their states could change from solid water, like ice, into air as steam. In this school of thought, there was a fifth element called the quintessence. The quintessence was thought to be the substance of heavenly bodies and the source of the other elements. Much has been written about the Philosopher's Stone, and there are scores of recipes for its preparation. Interestingly enough, we do know many details about the Philosopher's Stone and what it looked like. It was dark red in color and resembled a common irregular stone or glass crystal. The blood red color of the stone was its chief physical characteristic and showed up in many alchemical drawings as the Rose Cross, the Red King, and the Red Dragon. Rosicrucians often practice transforming themselves and their surroundings by raising the vibratory levels. They use the intonation of certain vowel sounds for this purpose. Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, or Paracelsus, was born in 1493. In a time when exploration was branching into new frontiers, he grew up in a home with his physician father, a man well versed in philosophy with an inclination toward an inquiry into knowledge. It was customary for young men who sought higher education to travel extensively. It was thought essential to their acquisition of important knowledge. These journeys took the students to various universities throughout Europe, but his took a more extensive worldview than many of his predecessors. Paracelsus is considered one of the most important figures in the history of alchemy. But who was he really, and why is he so important? Like many great thinkers throughout history, he rejected the traditional dogmatic methods of the scholastic system. He found his passion exchanging ideas with renowned alchemists of the time, whose studies were profoundly inspired by their experiments. He soon embarked on a quest and traveled the world, to Africa and to the boundaries of Arabia first. He was determined that further observation through intimate association was the only way to understand the underlying causes of disease. He believed it necessary to be close to people and to nature. He believed that they constitute the greatest laboratory available for research. In Spain, Paracelsus's knowledge for Hermetic philosophy allowed him to consult eminent Moorish occultists. It was here that we believe the biggest impact on his esoteric writings took place. His interest in the profound mysteries of human existence, which go beyond the care of his body, was thus heightened. Eventually, his travels took him to Russia. There, he was thoroughly impressed with a visit to Mongolian tribes. He noticed the powerful effects that faith and imagination had upon their healing of the sick. Thereupon, he wrote an extensive exposition of the subject, which constitutes an early treatise on hypnotism and psychosomatic medicine. During his peregrinations, he was plagued with lice and devised a successful formula for a powder to combat them. It was the first medicine of its kind. His knowledge of alchemy was so thorough that it gave him an advantageous insight into the chemical properties and their effects on the human organism. He wrote many of his formulas in the alchemical symbols commonly employed by the Rosicrucians of later years. This aroused jealousy in his profession, the members of which exercised strong political influence. In 1525, by their connivance, he was arrested in Salzburg and accused of giving support to rebellious peasants. No evidence was forthcoming, and so the charges were dismissed, but he was forced to leave the city. Yet, the stories of Paracelsus's fame continued to spread throughout Europe. In one case, he visited the home of a girl paralyzed since childhood. After a thorough examination of his young patient, he prescribed a medicine that he had dubbed Red Lion, which was also an alchemical symbol. To the amazement of those around, the girl, after a few applications, was able to walk again. Events like this added to the growing acclaim of his powers, and his writings had now become extensive. Though he became well known for his ability to cure untreatable illnesses, more importantly, he is known as a revolutionary who exposed profit sharing between physicians and apothecaries. His ethics and abilities were the target of jealousy, and eventually he was forced to flee for his life. One of his most notable accomplishments was helping to bring a plague to a halt in 1534 in Sturtzing in northern Italy. But after spending months treating the sick, he was outcast and shunned because of his skills, and some even feared he tapped into some malevolent power. Though he made a massive impact on the interpretation of medicine as a healing art, it was not until recently that scholars have acknowledged him as a truly revolutionary alchemist. He emphasized experimentation in his work rather than relying on ancient medical texts for authority. Carl Jung understood alchemy to represent the process of self-realization and individuation. It should be noted that two distinct, yet related, schools of thought emerged from the interpretation of alchemy. There is physical alchemy, in the case of putting metals and other substances through the physical process of transformation, and there is spiritual alchemy, which is essentially personal transformation of consciousness. Both concepts are important in understanding the later influence on the Rosicrucian curriculum. One cannot discuss alchemy without acknowledging the importance of one of the most recognized alchemical symbols, Emblem 21, from Michael Myers' Atalanta Fugiens. Make a round circle of the man and woman, and draw out of it a quadrangle, and out of the quadrangle a triangle. Make a round circle, and thou shalt have the stone of the philosophers. The illustration is an example of one way to interpret alchemy. According to the 17th century Rosicrucian alchemist Michael Meyer, alchemy can be seen in two ways. First, as a way of grouping together potent symbols that students may use as a focal point for meditative journeys. Second, it can be interpreted as an early translation of mysticism in the form of words, symbols, and pictures.
The response of alchemists to the Rosicrucian movement, which emphasized using techniques for elevating consciousness, kind of emerged during that time. It was really fruitful. It gave alchemy the idea that psychological operations could be performed too, that the same operations they used in the laboratory could be applied to psychology, could be applied to health, could be applied because they were universal principles. So you find the birth of psychology during that time, you find the birth of a science of consciousness at that time, the birth of physics, and the birth of chemistry. It was really a powerful time in history.
It is fascinating to realize that the alchemists of the late Middle Ages understood the necessity for humans to reconcile the two aspects, male and female, contained in every individual. People who acknowledge that their personality is composed of attributes that can be seen as either feminine or masculine and come to accept these characteristics are made more whole and balanced in their personality. Another important symbol is the rose and the cross, illustrated by the 16th century holistic healer and practitioner of medicine in the tradition of Paracelsus, Rosicrucian Robert Fludd. His rose and cross first appeared as an illustration in the fourth part of the Summum Bonum, published in 1629 in defense of the Rosicrucian fraternity. The Latin inscription means, "The rose gives honey to the bees." When one examines the components of the image, it is filled with symbolism and imagery that bring deeper meaning to the illustration and contemplation and can inspire insights. If there is one essential practice for all mystics and for Rosicrucians in particular, it is spiritual alchemy. This form of alchemy amounts to one of the foundations of philosophy and sets out the path we must follow in order to fulfill our inner evolution. This is precisely the great work that each human being must commit to accomplish in order to discover the philosopher's stone that dwells in the deepest part of themselves. We are set forth on a path with the choice to reveal the perfection of our own nature.